Alright all, here is your daily cut of what happened in the NBA on Christmas Day. Unfortunately for NBA fans all around the world, all of the Christmas days were kind of a dud and most of them were blowouts. The margin of defeats for each game as it went on were 13, 39, 28, 23, and 13. So not a lot of close basketball, but in the end we still did get to see all of our favorite star players come out and give us some good games, at least, individual player performance wise. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I still think we're all winners. We got to watch the best sport on earth for an entire day, 12 hours straight, however long that you've binged the Christmas Day games. But I want to give a few notes on each of them, or things that just stuck out to me. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I'll have timestamps for each game if you want to skip around as well. Starting with Heat Pelicans, the Heat picked up their first win of the season despite Brandon Ingram and Zion combining for 60 points. On the Heat side, they were led by Duncan Robinson, who had 7 threes leading into his 23 total points, and Dragic had an impressive 18 off the bench. Overall, I think this is a get-right game for the Heat, as they did lose their opener to the Orlando Magic in a bit of heartbreaking fashion. So to come out here and beat a promising team like the Pelicans, it'll serve as a reminder that this is a Heat team that went to the NBA Finals just a few months ago. They definitely still have all their pieces and all the talent is still there. They just needed this game. They even started a bit slow and were down from a majority of the first quarter, from what I remember, but they stormed back and had a pretty convincing W. Now, the biggest note for the Heat is that Jimmy Butler did not finish the game. He left at halftime with an ankle injury, so that'll definitely be something to monitor, as Butler remains their best player on the team, and hopefully he can have a speedy recovery. But this was an ankle injury that has been lingering, caused him to miss all of the preseason, so to see him leave halfway through game 2 is not exactly a great sign for the Heat fans, but he should be fine and, at the most a few weeks from now. As for the Pelicans, even though they lost, I was actually pretty surprised and happy with what I saw. They played Brandon Ingram 37 minutes, and Zion had a career high playing 38 minutes, and these are just obviously great signs because Zion has had the minutes restrictions all last season. Now to come out here and in game 2 see that the Pelicans trust him enough to give him 38 of a potential 48 minutes in a game. Great sign, and he looked fine doing it. He had a great game. Obviously wasn't enough, but he's still only in year 2, so he still has to figure out some of the things that mean helping his team get a W. And again, it's all fine. They're still a young team. They have plenty of time to figure things out. I was just happy to see the minutes distribution. And one other note, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Steven Adams signing, but it does seem like he's going to be playing a pretty important role. I still think there would have been a lot of better fits out there for the Pelicans to go get in terms of just finding a big to play alongside Zion that would best complement each other. But Steven Adams does provide them with the same old strength, rebounding defense, and again, it looks like he's going to play an important role in this team, so I guess it's a good thing that they locked him up to that extension. Now moving on to the Warriors and Bucks, this one went about as anyone would expect heading into the game. Bucks absolutely demolished the Warriors after a close game with the Celtics in which they lost. Chris Middleton led the way with 31 points as he continues to have a very hot start to the season. And like I said, this outcome is pretty much expected. This is the Bucks team that we expected to see at the start of the season. I mean, they put up 138 points and Giannis only had 15 of them. I think that just goes to show how much better of a team he has around him. I don't want to say that necessarily shows it, but again, it is evidence that there is still a very good team centered around Giannis. It's not just him putting up MVP numbers. They can win games even when Giannis doesn't have the best of them. And I think that just ultimately makes the Bucks even scarier, especially if they could find a way to actually perform this way in the playoffs. As for the Warriors, I'm going to hold back judgment after these 2 first games in which they've gotten absolutely blown out in both of them. That's because they haven't played in 9 months. Draymond hasn't logged a single minute yet. Kelly Oubre has been disastrously bad to start the season. I think he's made like 1 3 over the 2 in like 8 attempts and just has not been scoring the ball, hasn't been shooting well. His defense has been okay, but again, he's just been god-awful. James Wiseman actually seems to have something to him, and he's been one of their lone bright spots across these 2 games. And again, they faced 2 title contenders. They faced the Brooklyn Nets in Game 1, got blown out. Faced the Bucks in Game 2 and got absolutely blown out. So I like to see them against a team that might be more of their skill set or caliber to truly give them a judgment. In the Nets and Celtics game, Kyrie had 37 and KD put up 29, and they handled the Celtics pretty easily. It was a close game up and around until the 3rd, 4th quarter-ish, where the Nets went on a big run led by Kevin Durant when he really stepped it up and showed that he is still the same caliber player that he once was. I know it's very early into the season with just 2 games being played by the Brooklyn Nets, but I already feel pretty comfortable calling them contenders, or legit title contenders. Like, they honestly might be my favorites to come out of the East right now. Both Kyrie and KD are playing at MVP levels, and they're only going to get better as the season goes on, as they just get back into basketball shape again. And hopefully the injuries stay away from them, as they have been for the past couple of seasons. And again, if all things go well, I really don't see another team in the East beating Brooklyn 4 games out of 7 once you get to the playoffs, but again, a lot can change by that point. And I think Doris Burke, who was on the broadcast, made a very good point as well, that everyone on the Nets just seems to already have their role pretty much locked down and secured. She was talking about how Joe Harris, who usually has been a focal point for this Nets team in the past couple of seasons, only had 6 shot attempts and still had a very good game playing defense and just moving the ball in general. Karis LeVert seems to be good in his bench role, coming off the bench. Spencer Dinwiddie, he's just another great starter / rotational player who can come in, play defense, handle the ball a little, and just pretty much do it all. Jared Allen, DeAndre Jordan seem to have their platoon down in terms of playing the center, and they're both very good players. I think Jared Allen still deserves a bit more minutes, but that's besides the point. I just think I agree with Doris Burke in that this Nets team is already looking like they have their spots and just rotations, I don't want to say finalized, but at a very good point at this early in the season. And on the Celtics side of things, I really don't even think they had that bad of a game. They obviously didn't play their best. They didn't have their best shooting performances. Not Kemba. I'll get into Kemba in a second, but Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, they didn't have their best games, but they still had good games, scoring into the 20s. The bench is still looking like it's going to be better than last season, which is good for them. But most importantly, Kemba Walker isn't playing right now. He's not going to be playing until around January, February. And, until then, there's probably going to be a few more games like this for the Celtics where they play a good game against another good team and they just simply don't win. And that's because they're missing their third best player who is a recurring 20-point per game scorer, and not having that on the court makes a huge impact. And I think Celtics will be fine. Me personally being a Celtics fan, I wasn't too worried with this loss yesterday. Like I said, Nets are my favorites to come out of the East right now, and we were down one of our better players, and we stuck with them for 3 quarters, but just had one big run in the 4th that led to the end and the loss. In LA, each of LeBron, AD, and the new additions, Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell, they all scored 18 points and over, as it was really those 4 guys just leading to the big win against Dallas. Similarly to the Bucks, I think this is what we expected to see out of the Lakers coming into the season, fresh off the championship. I wasn't really expecting too much of a championship hangover from them, and that's mostly due to the fact that with the additions of Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder, it allows LeBron and AD to take time off and just rest as much as possible throughout these early season games. Both their minutes were in the low 30s, and they didn't even have to come back on the court at the end of the game because the Vogel was confident enough in Schroeder and Harrell to finish out the W against a good Dallas team, although they did already have a pretty big lead at that point. But either way, this is going to be a recurring factor for the Lakers. LeBron's been very vocal about it, that he needs a little bit more time to get rested up before he starts pushing himself, as he is in year 18. And AD, obviously, he's just a little more injury prone than other players, so it makes sense that the Lakers do not want to push these guys too hard at the start of the season, and they built the perfect roster to go out and be able to do that. As for the Mavericks, that means that they're now 0-2 to start the season. Porzingis is out, he won't be back for a month or 2, but they've just looked not right to start the season, that makes sense. Luka's had some great games, but he has looked a little bit sloppier than usual. I know some people are saying that he wasn't necessarily in shape when he got to training camp. I don't know if that's the issue, but this entire Mavericks team just has looked a bit sluggish, and I still have complete faith in them. Again, it's 2 game sample size, so it's nothing to go crazy about. Other than that, there's not much to talk about with Dallas other than Porzingis is going to be coming back. Luka's still putting up MVP type numbers to start his campaign. And I hope that they can ramp it up a little bit and start to figure things out, because I do have high hopes for the Mavericks later on down the season. And lastly, that brings up the Nuggets and Clippers, who finished out the night with the Clippers getting a pretty easy dub, stopping the comeback attempt from Denver. And in this game, PG had a team high 23, and Kawhi left with a nasty cut on his face due to a Ibaka elbow. So hopefully that's all figured out. I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere that he got 8 stitches. So again, we'll have to wait and see. But overall, the Clippers seem to have that chip on their shoulder from last season. They've already come out, they beat the Lakers, and then tonight, or last night, they beat the Nuggets. The two teams who ended up being, ending further than them in terms of the Western Conference Finals. And I mean, Lakers, they were resting their guys a little bit. And Clippers had every reason to win that first game against the Lakers. Lakers didn't necessarily need a win there. The Clippers needed it much more than Lakers. And then Clippers come out tonight, and they really just put their foot in the ground. Don't let the Nuggets come back as they did 3 times in the playoffs just a few months ago, and they secured this dub as well. The main note for the Clippers is that PG has had 2 great games to start the season. I think he's actually going to make a good bid for MVP, especially if Kawhi is to miss some time with this whole laceration issue. But again, PG's been balling. I think the slander got way too far at one point this offseason. PG's still a great player, top 15, maybe even top 10 player in the league. There's no reason to really doubt him. But the sucky thing for him is that no one's going to care, even if he does put up an MVP level season, no one's going to care until he performs in the playoffs and actually goes out and wins something. So I know I'm persevering for PG this season, but as with everything, we'll have to wait and see until playoffs come to get a full settlement on what exactly is happening there. And on the Nuggets side of things, Jokic was 1 rebound away from his second triple-double in as many games this season, and Jamal Murray was looking rough until the second half where he started to put on a scoring effort, and at the end of the day, those two both had pretty good solid games, and to me, this is where MPJ needs to break out of his shell and back up his talk of being the 3rd scoring option on this Nuggets team. It was great for them that Will Barton and Monte Morris combined for 28 off the bench, but when your starters are only getting production from the star players in Jokic and Murray, at least one of the other guys in that starting lineup is going to have to come up with a good effort, whether that be Paul Millsap, whether that be Gary Harris, whether that be MPJ. It just has to end up being one of them. MPJ has already said that he wants to be the 3rd scoring option and 3rd star of this team. And I know he's still very young. He's only in his 2nd full season, but there is going to come a point where he's going to have to show that he can be that player, or else he might get moved, or the Nuggets just might not be as championship ready as we thought. And that will do it for the Daily Cut on the Christmas Day games. Late Merry Christmas to anyone that is watching this. And outside of that, leave some comments down below on what your thoughts of the Christmas Day games were. Other than that, leave a like if you enjoyed this video or enjoyed this type of content. And as always, most importantly, thank you for watching.